All right, welcome to live training. Thanks for joining me tonight. Tonight's topic is member review, $2.50 90 man with dead eyes, part 1. Thank you to Dead Eyes for sending me a couple submittals. We're going to look at Dead Eyes' 90 man tonight. Let me get the replayer queued up. Okay, and you should be seeing Dead Eyes' hand now. Let me know if you are. Ace-9 offsuit, beautiful. Let's go ahead and roll tape. Okay, so there's an open for a raise. Actually, I like to fold. I think if it's folded to us on the button, I might put in a raise with ace-9, kind of test the blinds out, but when it's raised in front, no reason to get involved with a weaker ace. I think that's fine. Seven-4, easy fold. Not to be results oriented. We would have hit a flop, but we don't want to be investing chips with really weak hands at this point. 7-6, I think that's fine to fold. As we go through Dead Eyes' tournament, if you have questions or comments, throw them in the chat, and we can talk about them or take a look. King 10, I definitely like folding that in early position. Again, that might be something I would open in late position if it was folded to me, but we're going to pass that with action in front. We're going to pass that in early position. So a couple things I'm noticing here is we're just kind of, oh, Jack 10 under the gun. I think that's a good fold. I don't think that's the type of Jack 10, especially suited, looks like kind of a sexy hand, and people like to try and get in and see flops with it. Oh, let me pause it here. People like to try and get in and see flops with it, but under the gun is really not a good idea to be getting involved with that type of hand, because oftentimes you wind up facing a raise behind you. The hand doesn't really play well in raised pots out of position, and it winds up being just a kind of a leak trying to sneak in with that hand. So I think folding the Jack 10 under the gun is good, actually. Again, it would be another type of holding that I think is fine to attack at late position if it's folded to us, but early position, we really don't know what's going to happen behind us. It's going to be raised and re-raised. We're going to get 7 callers. We just don't know what's going to happen. So rather than trying to prognosticate that or try and sneak in and leak off some chips in that effort, it's usually better just to pass the early position Jack 10. So here in this hand, we are in the big blind. Let me cue this back up to the start. So we're in the big blind with Queen 9. We have a limper. Pass to us. We opt to check our option. I think that's fine. We've missed this flop. This flop texture is, we're heads up with one limper. It's just going to miss the limper a lot as well. People are limping, limper could hit this real hard with like a set. People tend to be limping in, I think, with a lot of small pocket pairs, 2 Broadway cards, and perhaps stuff like Ace-X suited, maybe some King-X suited. Depends on how loose they are, how far down that kind of stuff goes. With the exception of spade draws and sets, most of that range has missed this board or flopped pretty weak. So if we're going to make some time of move on this pot, we should probably actually lead right out now. We're the big blind. We got a free play. We have random any 2 cards. We can easily represent that we've connected with this type of board texture, because we could have 7-5 offsuit for all they know. Deadeyes opts to check, and then the limper bets 60 into a pot of 50, so slightly overbets the pot. That I would generally just pass at this point. Deadeyes is not passing. Deadeyes is actually calling. So I'm not sure where we're going with the call out of position. I don't really like this play. And Deadeyes is not here tonight, so I wish he had been able to be here to give a little insight perhaps as to what was going on. But yeah, the pot's really small. This guy is showing some legitimate strength. I mean, maybe he's just, maybe he's got nothing and he's just trying to take it down and end the hand, but we don't really have anything either. We just have queen high and we're out of position. We have a gut shot. We can catch an 8. So we have kind of a weak draw, basically. Not really a good spot to be just checking and calling. And then we're out of position. So, like, let's say that we make this call and the turn peels off, the 8 of diamonds, so we get there. There's going to be a 4-liner to a straight on the board. We're out of position. It's going to be pretty hard to extract value when we do catch our lucky card. So it's just not a good spot for us to be pursuing. If we were going to pursue it, we probably should have led into the pot and taken our stab there. And then if it doesn't work and we get called, maybe we get lucky and help our hand on the turn anyway. But I don't really like this play so much. This is probably often some type of one-pair hand tried to like protect its hand. And maybe he's trying to take it down with air, but again, we don't have anything ourselves really but a gut shot. Could be some kind of drawing hand, which his equity against us is really good, and he has position, which means if he has some kind of draw and he's willing to barrel, he's going to wind up getting this pot on the turn, whether he makes it or not, unless we help our hand. So I think this is not a good spot. Not sure what Deadeye's intention was in making this call, but I don't like it. I would have just either perhaps led for 25 or 30 on the flop, see what happens, or just check and fold would be fine. Okay, so we do help on the turn. We hit a queen. I think actually when I hit the queen, now he checks again. It's a strange name you'd call. The villain has a strange name. I think when we hit the queen, now I would actually prefer to lead into him here. And it's not, to like quote unquote see where we're at necessarily, but it would be a value bet where we can extract value from worse. Okay, and the board, the board texture has a lot of draws possible, and certainly with his flop bet, he can easily have a number of draws. So I don't know that we really want to risk giving him a free card to draw. We'd like to get some value if he's got draws. If he's sitting there with a hand like, I don't know, King 7 suited, he must not necessarily going to believe that all of a sudden, we hit the queen, so now we're betting. So we're usually going to get called by like 7x and stuff like that. And certainly any draw. We want to get value from them and not give him a free shot to outdraw us if we've improved to the best hand now. So I think I would actually lead here and not check. Okay, the villain checks behind. So the river is a 3 of hearts. It's not a complete blank. It does complete a straight for a 4, but that's probably the least likely of the draws. We've decided to check. He bets 80. I assume we're going to call with our queen. And we're good. So, and this is I think everything I said on the flop action stands. And on the turn, here's an example of, I think we're getting called for sure. The guy's got a flop top pair with the gut shot, and now we donk the turn into him when the queen hits. I think we're getting called on the turn for sure, and then we can get a token value bet paid off on the river and really kind of extract more value for catching our lucky turn card. So I don't think we played this hand particularly well. And I would have done several things different, but we did get a good result. But I think we probably shouldn't have been here in the first place, and we definitely could have gotten more value. So, any questions on that hand? It's kind of an interesting spot. questions on that one. Really wish that Deadeyes was here to tell us what the thinking was with the check call on the flop, because it looks like. So one of the things we're doing in the review here is we can kind of talk about the strategy of the play and what it looks like we should or shouldn't do and stuff like that. But it leaves another level unaddressed at times, which is something that you might get like in like a private coaching session. You're working with a coach, then you would actually be your coach would say, well, what were you thinking there? What was going on? Why are we check calling? And kind of asking you to explain the thought process, and then we can get into the thought process, because sometimes on the surface a play doesn't necessarily look really good, and then the thought process might have been solid behind it, or might have not been solid behind it, or whatnot. So you can really get into the thought process and make sure that we're making good decisions. So just as an example, I mean, I have no idea, but just as an example I could think of offhand, let's say, for instance, the check call doesn't look good to us here or to me here, but let's say that Deadeye says, well, wait, I've played a whole bunch of these 90-mans with this EEM guy, and I've seen him in this spot before. When he overbets the pot, he tends to be bluffing a lot. So, I called with the intention of, if he checks behind me on the turn, betting the river and expecting to take it down a high percentage of the time. So then the thought process there would make a little more sense. You guys see what I'm saying? It's nice to be able to dig into the thought process and make sure that we're kind of thinking in ways that will produce good plays, value, stuff like that. What do I think of the way the villain played his hand? Yeah, I think the villain limped in with 9-7 suited in middle position. It's a bad play. He should be throwing his hand away first in, or he should be raising first in. He shouldn't be limping with it in middle position. I could see limping with it behind a whole bunch of limpers or something, but I don't like his play, especially with Zell behind him. Zell Jaco, but it's suited. Yeah, with Zell Jaco behind him, I was going to talk about this before we got involved in the hand with Deadeyes here, but what I'm seeing initially in this table is we're always looking for picking up reads on our opponents. Who can we exploit? How are we going to do that? One of the things I've noticed early is Zell Jaco. This is like I think maybe the first pot he actually didn't get involved in. This guy's been in every pot. He's done a couple of limps. He's done some raising. He 3-bet pulley in the blind versus blind spot. So the guy's been very active and fairly aggressive. And so we're limping in with this guy behind us in position. What if Zell raises? So now we limp in, and Zell makes it 80 or 100. Now what are we going to do? Are we going to call a raise and try to play this hand out of position against an aggressive opponent? Not a good spot to be putting ourselves in. So I really don't like the way the villain played it pre-flop. On the flop, I think his betting was fine. He doesn't need to bet more than the pot, but a pot-size bet roughly is fine with his hand. Top pace ends up against a random blind hand. Almost certainly has flopped the best hand, and he has he has outs to improve to a straight and stuff. So yeah, I think it's fine. Check behind on the turn. Maybe a little cautious when the queen hits. I don't really like the 9-7's river bet so much, because I think it's generally going to be hard to get called by worse. So, but maybe he can get called by ace-6 or whatever. We did check call the flop, so it's reasonable to think that we perhaps had some type of one-pair hand on the flop, and then the turn goes check-check. Then we check the river. We don't bet our queen. So it's probably reasonable for him to think that he has the best hand, and he goes for some thin value. It's not bad, actually, going for some thin value with his hand there. But he shouldn't even be limping in the first place. So that's my thoughts on the 9-7. He's still limping in. Ace-7, yeah, I like the pass here. I would just pass that. We have, our limping friend, then the loose aggressive guy raising him. We don't want to be playing a weak ace out of position in a raised pot. It's just bad news. Queen 10, I think that's fine to fold. So a couple things that we've noticed so far about the opponents. We have EEMMC2, who is loose pre-flop and likes to limp in. We have Zell, who's very loose and semi-aggressive, seems to do a mix of limping and raising. And then Pulley, who, here's an interesting hand. Okay, so EE is gone, but Zell's got a double stack, so that's good to note. And then Pulley is the other thing that we may have missed if we weren't paying attention, because it was only really one hand. And that was when Pulley was blind versus blind with Zell. Classic starters there, right? King deuce and 7-4. When Pulley was blind versus blind with Zell, it was folded to them. Pulley opened for a raise. And Zell 3-bet him and Pulley mucked. So what we can learn from that brief exchange is that Pulley recognized and was willing to pull the trigger, no pun intended, on a steal situation, and then when he got 3-bet, he had a fold button. So that's something that we'll want to also make note of, that this might be a good re-steal candidate. If he opens in a steal position, I'll pause it here real quick. If Pulley opens in a steal position later, and we know that he's capable of doing that perhaps wide, and we know that he's capable of folding to a 3-bet. So that's information that's very important, especially at this level, where we're looking to find folders that we can use to accumulate some chips without cards. And they may not be aplenty so much at this level, but here's one in terms of Pulley, so that's something to note. Okay, so let me jump back and see what happened here, because I'm yapping away and not really watching the hand. So we're in the big with deuces. Okay, under the gun min raise, loose Zelko calls, small blind calls. This is a very easy call. Absolutely correct to set mine. We need implied odds of, I like roughly 15 to 1 implied odds to set mine. So here we have to call 30 more. We're getting 7 to 1 immediate odds on the call, and then easily we have more, there's a lot of money behind in a multi-way pot. If we hit a set, we can easily expect to recover enough to make this call profitable, and it's a tiny percentage of our stack, 30 chips, so this is absolutely a call. And absolutely a fold when someone blasts into it in a 4-way pot. We don't have a deuce, so perfectly played there, I think. Jack 5 suited, it's another pretty suited hand, right? We should be folding that kind of stuff. Even with 2 limpers, it's fine to be folding that. Queen 5, of course, is a fold. It is kind of an odd table dynamic. Good observation. Definitely is kind of an odd table dynamic. Seems to be not a shortage of gamble at this table. And then notice that the new stack that came in, EE got busted, and we got a new stack in that's a triple stack. He's tripled up. So, it's very early in the tournament, and when we see someone get moved in like that that's tripled up this early, it means one of two things. Either they got, lucky big hand situation, or they've been playing a lot of pots like Zell, and it's worked out for them so far. So this could be an indicator, just his stack size this early, that we're dealing with another loose player and or loose aggressive player. But we know we have to look for observations, make sure that we get confirmation on that based on what they do. Do you put tournament bad players on your buddy list? That's a good question, Perk. I think if you're a tournament grinder, oh, here we have a hand we may play. Okay, so we opt to raise it. I like that. Just to finish answering Perk's question, I think if you're a tournament grinder and you encounter a very bad player, it makes sense that you might add them to your buddy list and note, so you can check lobbies and stuff to see if they're signed up, or search for them to see if they're signed up for tournaments or registered for tournaments. But a couple things with that, it's probably not a big deal. Like Puck said, especially at this level, at the micro levels, it's too many to list, really. There's a lot of really bad play. And secondly, if you're grinding sit and goes, 27-man, 45-man, 90-man, probably there's a lot of regular player pools, so you get to know, you're going to get in one and you're going to have a lot of weak players. You'll know a bunch, or you'll have stats or data on a bunch of them already because you grind that regularly. And in terms of bigger field tournaments, if the biggest whale in the world is signed up for a tournament that's got 1,000 players, it's a big deal, right? The chances you'll even get on the table with them is small, so really not that important. Not like it's much different with cash games where you can actually you find someone sitting at a table, and if you get a seat on that table, you're there with them until they leave or you leave, and you can actually target them. It's a little different. Target to playing with them. It's harder to do in tournaments. Okay, so here we have 2 aces in the bag. Zell sadly just limps in, decides not to raise this time, but we are going to raise to 5x. I like this raise. I think this is a good raise size. We're raising a little extra than what we might normally pre-flop, okay, going 5x. We might normally go 2.5 to 3x at this blind level and then add one for a limper, but we're going to put in extra here, and I think this is good for a couple reasons. One, we want to charge our opponent a premium to play against us in position. 2, we raise extra for value, and this guy's going to give it. This guy's really loose. Now that I said that, he'll probably mark, but this guy's been super, super loose so far at this table, not shy about gambling. This is a guy we'd like to build a pot against. So I like this raise sizing, and he does mark. But nonetheless, I mean, we don't always get the result we perhaps would like or expect, but I think that was a good play, and certainly if that happens again in orbit from now, I would like a similar raise sizing as well for the same reasons. Yeah, I don't think that raise sizing is too big. It's important not to be results-oriented and say, well, because the guy folded, this is too big. I think it's fine. Probably a normal sizing is more like 4x there, but I would increase it a little bit, being out of position and against a big fish who's very loose. I like increasing it because they will often give value. Same kind of thought process here. We have 10s. Obviously, it's not as big as aces, but this is the same thing. This isn't to try and chase people off or win the pot now or whatever. This is, I think, to gain value against the big fish who's limped in, and we have position on them, and they're going to give value. And we give a little bit of extra encouragement to the blinds and the button to go away, which is fine as well. We would certainly not mind isolating on the guy who's super loose and we have position on. Oh, Shazam. This dude shoves on us. People are saying fold. This dude shoves on us. I assume the other guy's going to fold who limped. Everyone thinks fold. What's his range to shove on us here? Puck says insta-call. I don't think this is an insta-call or an insta-fold. I think this is something we should think about. Okay, so what's his range to shove? Jacks plus. Okay. Yeah, if you think his range is queens plus or jacks plus, then this is a fold for sure. Okay. I don't think that I agree with that range though. We don't have a ton of information on this guy, but the fact that he came to the table with a triple stack indicates perhaps a looseness. So I think this guy is going to be having more than just queens plus in this range. I don't know if he's shoving like this with like suited connectors. This is also we just 5x'd Zell's limp a couple hands ago. So perhaps he might think we're a little full of baloney. Certainly he can have jacks plus. Certainly he can have ace king or ace queen. But I think he also is going to have some smaller pocket pairs in this range. Yeah, I think he's going to also have some smaller pocket pairs in this range as well. And I'm not sure that I'm quick to fold this against a guy that might be shoving a bit wider. So let's see what we actually did. Okay, we actually called. And we are up against ace-queen offsuit. And we beat two pair. He goes runner, runner, two pair, and it's not good. Okay, so I think, again, the entire, we got obviously a fantastic result that's not relevant to the decision-making process. The entire basis of whether this is a good call of the shove or not depends on this guy's range and what our assessment of it is. Okay, and also that what they may think of us and our range, and that can be tricky at micro stakes because some players are thinking about what our range is, some are thinking about what we might have but not in a logical manner, and then some aren't even thinking about it. All right. So, but I think it's safe to say that the read is semi-accurate that we're kind of laying out here. If he's shoving over us with ace-queen offsuit, he certainly has pocket pairs lower than tens in his range. Nines, eights, sevens for sure. Maybe even any pocket pair. He's probably also shoving ace-jack suited, maybe ace-ten suited. Who knows how much wider he might be shoving. But he's certainly not just on, jacks plus an ace-king if we now get some evidence here that he's doing it with ace-queen offsuit. Okay, so some standard folds here. Please keep the chat respectful. So it's good to discuss these hands and spots, and it's certainly fine to be disagreeing, but please keep it respectful. Okay. The king 5, I was about to say I would actually raise this guy in the blind, but what we didn't see here is he's sitting out. So the call, dead ice just calls or completes, and the guy automatically folds because he's sitting out. So that's fine. I think if the guy's there, I would put in a raise with the king, just kind of attack. Yeah, Eugene certainly could have just 3-bet that hand, a standard amount, and not all-in jam, but he probably doesn't understand that kind of thing. Ace-10, I would have opened for a raise here to isolate Zell. I don't really like folding the ace-10 against, again, the loose limper and Zell. And ace-10 is, you know, if Eugene shoves over us, we can fold ace-10. That I would have no problem folding ace-10 to a 3-bet. But we should, it's light years ahead of Zell's limping range, and we should be isolating him when we can, when we have an edge in position. So I would have definitely put in a raise to isolate Zell and then gone from there. I think we should be rooting for Zell now anytime he's in a pot that we're not involved in, because it looks like he might run out of chips before we get a chance to get some more of them. The standard play with ace-queen is to flat out of position. Yeah, in Eugene's spot, it's kind of a tough spot to be flatting out of position, especially when you'll be in like a 3-way pot, out of position. It's a bloated pot. I don't know that it's a great spot to be flatting out of position so much. I mean, I guess probably it's preferable to flat and keep the pot small. Folding seems a bit too tight to me. Yeah, fold's an option, but it seems a bit too tight in the ace-queen spot, especially given, you know, a super loose limper and then someone just raising to isolate them, which they did 2 hands earlier as well. I think folding seems a bit too tight. Okay, so here we limp in on the button. I'm just going to cue this back here. So we got 2 limpers. You know, I think this is actually fine to limp on the button. You can make a case for raising to isolate this guy or these guys, and you know, use your position against them. But they are both super loose. They're a bit goofy. I mean, we saw Eugene with the jam of the ace-queen. I think it's fine to limp in as a speculation here. For 50 chips, we can certainly afford 50 chips out of our stack at this point. We have position on 2 guys that, if we connect well with the flop, 2 guys that may well give excessive action, so I think this is okay. I mean, the case for raising these guys, you know, if we're going to raise these 2 guys to isolate one or both of them because they're loose and they're limping a wide range and stuff, then the purpose behind that is really that we're anticipating, or we should be doing that if we anticipate we'll get a lot of folds, either pre-flop or folds on the flop to our c-bet. And then, you know, if we don't get folds pre-flop or on the flop, we have a, you know, 6-5 suited is not a bad backup plan. But we're not, you know, raising for value with 6 high. We're raising when we think we'll get a lot of folds. I don't know with these 2 guys that we can anticipate that we'll get a lot of folds pre-flop or on the flop even. Just based on the way they played, I think that's a little optimistic. Like we're just going to push these guys around. So in that case, I think it's fine to try and sneak in for a cheap investment and then look for extracting value if we do connect. And when we don't, then it's turned out to just be a cheap investment that we'll give up. So I think that plays out pretty standard. Interesting to see Gideon call with second pair there on the flop. Check and call with second pair. Something we want to note about Gideon, perhaps we want to value bet Gideon a bit thinner and not bluff Gideon so much. Jack 4, easy fold. Queen 8, I think that's fine to fold. Yeah, the loose goose is now gone, so too bad for us. But that's why we want to try and take the opportunities to isolate, like with the ace-10 where we folded after his limp. That's why we want to take those opportunities to isolate when we can and extract value when we can, because those guys usually don't last real long. Somebody's going to get their chips. It might as well be us. Okay, so now we're at a new table. Comes with it new observations and new reads. King Jack offsuit. Late position limper. That usually indicates to me a weak player. So usually often players that limp first into the pot tend to be weaker in general, but especially when they limp in late position like this, first in. That's usually a pretty weak player. That might be reasonable to get involved in position with this player. So it might be reasonable to raise this player. If we're going to raise to isolate with King Jack, we'll have to play it, I think, somewhat cautiously post-flop. So like if we get callers behind us that are not the limper, we don't want to go crazy with King Jack. But I think it's okay to attack what appears to be weakness here, so I might have attacked. Folding's not terrible. It's a new table to us. We don't have any reads on anyone yet. We don't know what the table dynamic is. We don't know who's loose, who's tight, who's crazy. So I think when we know very little information, it makes sense to me to err on the side of caution. But I, would also not be bad to attack a weak limper in position either, and just making sure that we do so in kind of a controlled manner and don't go nuts with our hand if stuff, people start to break out or things start to get wild. Yeah, people might limp. Yeah, people might limp better hands, sure. So the passive limpers like that, they can limp. I was just in a cash game earlier, and there was a guy that was limping in with ace-king. So people can certainly limp better hands than King Jack, but they're also, when they play passively, they're going to be limping a lot of worse hands. Their range is going to be pretty wide, and perhaps sometimes a bit more fit or fold post-flop. So, and that's another point about perhaps waiting to get a little more information in erring on the side of caution. This guy may be loose pre-flop, but we don't really know what that means. Is he going to play fit or fold? Is he like a calling station? We don't really know. So how do we best, do we put pressure on him when we miss? How do we best extract value when we've improved? What if we hit second pair? What if the flop's Queen Jack X? We might find ourselves in some more tricky situations. I tend to sometimes take those spots and rely on my post-flop play and ability to read opponents. But certainly, if that's not a strength yet of one's game, it make more sense to err on the side of caution so you have a bit more definitive info about what type of opponent you're actually dealing with. So once we know Kind of like we talk about in the theory classes, the profiling for exploitation and classes like that. Once we know who we're dealing with, we can craft strategies to exploit them and to take advantage of that. But we don't really know yet. There is a bit more measure of guesswork involved, obviously. Card player says, raise is a decent option here, but if he calls the raise, we don't really know where we are. Well, I know where I am. I'm in position against the guy who limped called a raise. And that's a pretty good spot to be in. Whether we improve our king-jack or not, that's not a bad scenario to put ourselves in. So obviously the ability to play well post-flop helps a lot in getting involved in those situations. But if we can take the initiative in the hand and be playing in position against a weak player, that's not a bad spot to be putting ourselves in. Yeah, if a king falls like it did there, we can't be sure if we're good or not. So, again, I don't think that it's going to lead to long-term success, being afraid to get involved in spots simply because you might lose sometimes. I think we don't want to pass a lot of plus EV spots. And if we have a spot that we can isolate a weak player with what figures to be the best hand against their range, then and in position, then that's generally a spot I want to take. Yeah, we can control the pot a lot better in position. And when the flop comes king high like that, I think we're usually going to have the best hand against a weak limper. And yeah, he can have like king queen or whatever, but he's gonna have a lot of air, a lot of worse made hands. He'll have king x suited and stuff like that too. So here again, we have ace-9 on the button. There's a limper under the gun, which is a bit more suspect. Someone's limping. Now this isn't late position, they're under the gun. There is the possibility that someone might limp to be trapping with a big hand. I generally don't. That's not my first line of thought that that's what someone's doing until I see them actually make that play. We have a loose player. We've already observed the player's pretty loose. But still, under the gun, they're probably limping a bit stronger range than normal. Ace-9 might be probably ahead of their range for the most part. We could raise to isolate the limper. We could actually limp behind them and use our position to keep the pot small, but playing with what we figure to be the best hand against their range. Okay, and then keeping the pot small and using our position to make decisions post-flop. I think either play would be fine. I don't really care so much for folding the ace-9 in this spot when we're, I think, pretty clearly ahead of this limper's range, and we have position on them. And the whole field's gone except for the blinds. It's not like we got 8 players behind us still to act or whatever. Right, card player, I'm not sure why you're still on the king-jack hand, but yeah, I agree completely. That's what I said. When we're going to raise to isolate that guy with a hand like king-jack, we want to make sure we do it in kind of a controlled manner and don't go crazy post-flop. So yeah, I agree completely. They can obviously show up with a limped better hand, and they can you know, they can flop freak 2 pairs. And they can be limping with small pairs and hit a set. You know, I mean, all that stuff's possible, absolutely. So I think we're on the same page there. But that doesn't mean we should pass the spot. Okay, this I think, cue this back. So we have 29 bigs. This guy is open shoving into 5,100. He's been pretty maniac-y, so I think this is definitely a call with the ace-queen. Yeah, and and we have the best hand. So regardless of the fact that we got a good result, it was still based on the range we know this guy is shoving with. That's a pretty easy call with ace-queen. Now the guy's going to sit out. Maybe it's dinner he can't play, right? He's just now he can't wait any longer. Dinner's getting cold, so now he's going to sit out. Now he's back in. 7-6 suited. I definitely like the fold there. It's fine to fold to just open raise in mid position. Go ahead and fold. 10-9 suited, we open for 3x. I think we're at the blind level now where we don't need to necessarily 3x it. We can raise smaller. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of opening 10-9 to attack here with a bit of a shorter stack on the button. We've got the very loose player in the small blind who we are going to figure is going to call us with a pretty wide range, and we're usually going to have to show them the best hand. We're not going to, you know, get them to fold. Well, I mean, obviously they can miss flops and they'll fold, but I think we're going to wind up going to showdown with Kara 5-5 more often than normal. And then, of course, we have the maniac in the big blind who might just shove because it's Tuesday or whatever. You know, he might shove because the clock struck 9. So I don't know. We can't call a shove. We can't, you know, we can't really call 3-bet with 10-9. I think we'd have to give up to those. So I don't know that this is a good spot to attack. I like the thought process of taking an aggressive stance in late position with a nice little deceptive type of hand, but I don't think these 2 blinds are good targets for it with 10 high. I think we should be widening our value range against them and taking away some of the bluff range. And I guess 10-9 suited is more of a semi-bluff pre-flop, but I think we should probably tone those down a bit, but attack wider with, you know, stuff that we plan to call the maniac shove with. I don't think 10-9 really qualifies. So, okay, so we get just the small blind call. Ace-King 3, small blind checks to us. We should absolutely be following through with an ace and king on the board and make a continuation bet there. So I think we're missing an opportunity to take it down when Kara doesn't basically have an ace or king. And Kara, of course, can have an ace or king, but Kara is also going to have a lot of smaller pocket pairs and be calling with suited connectors and just a whole array of stuff that has missed this flop, and it's a very scary flop versus a pre-flop raiser who, you know, people raise pre-flop with ace-king. So this is a scary flop if Kara has not improved, and we'll be able to take this down a lot with, you know, just 10 high c-betting. So I think we should throw a c-bet out. C-bet sizing here, I think it's only really necessary to go, we don't need to make a huge c-bet. We can make it like, yeah, half the pot is fine, 450. Probably don't want to go a lot smaller than that, but even something a little bit, a touch less than half the pot should be fine. If Kara doesn't have an ace, king, or spade draw, they're not going to really, Kara can't really call, you know, 450 even. So we might as well make give ourselves a little bit better bluff price, because they're just not going to be able to call if they haven't improved. And see, here's what happens. We check behind on the flop. Now if they bet the turn, we're just, we have to give up. We're done with it. And we give ourselves really no chance to win the pot by not c-betting. We're heads up in position. We've been checked to. We're the pre-flop raiser. And the flop texture is one that hits pre-flop raisers well. Like an ace and a king on the board is kind of the quintessential flop texture for that. We should be c-betting our error in trying to take that down. Pretty standard. Valor chicks tight. $10-4 under the gun, easy fold. $7-3, I think that's fine to fold. I mean, we heads up blind versus blind. I like to take kind of an aggressive stance, especially against this stack size. But if we're gonna give them a walk, I think that's fine to give them a walk with our absolute worst hands. Maybe let me pause it here. Maybe it at worst boosts our image a little bit. That look, we have an obvious steal spot. We're not stealing, so we. Perhaps to anyone who's paying attention, we get a little bit more credit in the future. This hand, I think I would have opened with the king-9. So it's folded to us in the cutoff. Again, this is the type of spot. We have the really loose player in the big blind, but this is what I was talking about the last time when we had the 10-9 suited, is that I would widen the value range, and we can, I think, it's kind of thin value, but we can raise king-9 actually for value here against Kara's big blind, because Kara's going to be calling us with many worse hands, including dominated kings and dominated nines. And with we make it like we're going like 2.5x. We go 350, 375, whatever is fine. And then if someone comes over the top and shoves, we can throw king-9 away. But it's a reasonable isolation play. We haven't seen a lot of 3-bet shoving here, except for a couple of the maniac-type players, but no one behind us at this table. So if one of these, if the button is small blind, jams, we can throw king-9 away pretty easily. $6-5. Looks kind of like the hero doesn't have a clear plan on what hand to play in what spots. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit what it looks like, I think, with dead eyes. Maybe not so much as not having a plan, but really not knowing how to implement or find those spots. So I think it looks to me, well, we'll see more because we're still early. In this is going to be a two-part review, so we're still early in this deal. But it looks perhaps like Deadeyes has some of the right ideas. Oh, we have a playable hand. Perhaps Deadeyes has some right ideas about some aggression and attacking, but isn't really, maybe hasn't built the skill sets or experience yet to identify some of those spots. So that's part of what we're going to learn and see in this review, and that's what we've been doing, is talking about these spots when they're not so good, like with the 10-9 perhaps, or when they are good and we miss them, like with King-Jack, although that's debatable. I know we've debated that a bit, but I think the King-Jack was a reasonable isolation spot. Or the Ace-9 on the button when Kara limped under the gun. Okay, so here we have two aces under the gun. Obviously we'll be playing this. Yeah, the min raise, I don't necessarily care for the min raise. I think this could be a bet sizing tell. Again, not sure how many people at this table would be paying attention, but this is the first time, we have raised several times at this table, and they've all been at this blind level to 450. Now we're going min to 300, and we're under the gun. It really reeks of strength. At least we're kind of broadcasting strength. Again, we don't know how many of these opponents are actually tuning into the broadcast, but anyone that is, I think this is kind of like a red alert for them. So I would prefer just to open our standard amount, for which, I like to go a little less than 3x, but we've been doing 3x at this blind level, so I think we should 3x it again. And hope someone plays with us. So we get no action. Too bad. So maybe someone, picked up on the bet sizing. Maybe they all just had garbage. Who knows? But I think we should keep our bet sizing consistent there. Looks like the Maniac is about to be done. One of the things we see in this, and this is $2.50 90 man, one of the things we are seeing is if you opt to play a patient tag type game, you certainly can have some, it was a good play with the threes. You certainly can have some success with that at this level because there's so many players that are just playing bad. So like Valor Chick's got a nice stack here, and we've seen Valor Chick really get involved in two big pots and show queens and aces. So just kind of picking up a couple hands and being fortunate enough to get action on them from crazy people, and you have a stack. So I think that's something that it's a good takeaway for you guys with getting into grinding bankroll these games and stuff. You can really take a kind of a snug tag type approach and still be exploiting all the weak sauce that goes on in these games. But and you could expect to have some success with it. And then as your experience level grows, you get more experience under your belt, you start implementing and learning some new tools and stuff, then you can expand on that and open it up a bit to be doing more things like isolating weak limpers and doing re-steals against folders and stuff like that. But you can actually, without that experience level to comfortably start doing that stuff yet, still compete in these games because the play is just pretty bad. So here we have Attila opening for a raise. That's a pretty standard raise sizing there, 375, 2.5x. Valor Chick flatting. So Valor Chick we can presume does not have kings or aces. Attila could. Valor Chick does not, or Valor Chick would have 3-bet based on what we've seen. I don't think Valor is flatting with aces or kings. So I think we're ahead of Valor Chick. Attila queens plays good against that range. So we're 3-betting. I like the 3-bet. And I don't think that we can fold now ever with 2 queens in the spot. So once we 3-bet, we're committing ourselves to going. If one of these people come over the top here, I think we have to call it off. So yeah, kind of sucked to be coolered against kings or aces, but I think players are also going to come over the top and go with jacks, tens, ace, king. If they were going with jacks, tens, kings, and aces, it would be dead even money against 2 queens. And then throw ace, king in there, and we're decent equity favorites. So, but they all just laid down. Our stack sizes are like roughly 30 bigs. I don't think I'm ever 3-betting with 30 big blind stack and then folding 2 queens. pretty standard. Ace-king here, we're opening to 3x. So it looks like we're staying with... Let me pause it here. Looks like we're staying with the 3x mantra when we have not aces. We have a new player at the table who's got a huge stack, and they're min 3-betting us. It's tough to know what that really means. Oftentimes a min 3-bet is a sign of a really big hand, but this guy's got a ton of chips, so this could easily be more of a bully play, not so much the really big type of hand. And we also have, you know, a blocker to aces or kings. We have one of each. So I'm not really sure that I like calling here. I suppose if we call, the plan is to fold when we don't hit an ace or a king. But the problem with that is we're going to not hit an ace or king roughly 2/3 of the time. And so then we're doing a lot of folding. And the 1/3 of the time that we do catch an ace or a king on the flop, we often won't get stack action for it. So I don't really like so much calling this. I think given this guy's stack and the fact that this is often going to be kind of a bully type move, I think we should 4-bet, planning to get it in with ace king. And again, it's not like a cash game. We're not sitting 200 big blinds deep here. You know, we're under, you know, we're 30 big blinds deep or whatnot, 32 big blinds deep. This isn't super deep stacks, and we have a premium starter. So I think this is a good spot to attack. I would like to leverage fold equity and give this guy a chance to throw away. You know, if he's just bullying, give him a chance to throw it away. If we could take it down without having to win a showdown, that's a great result. And I think ace-king will play fine against his range when he doesn't go away. So here's the flop, 8-8-4, and now we're just throwing our hand away. You know, probably better to play that more aggressively pre-flop and plan to play for stacks if we have a hand like ace-king. So now that we saw that, we're saying 4-bet shove, right? Okay, so here, yeah, after we see the ace-5 hand, and here it is, the huge shove. We saw that dude earlier do it with what, ace rag or whatever. Here it is again, the huge shove. The guy may be tilting a little bit. Obviously, jacks are a monster in this spot. Yes, he can have queens, kings, or aces. Although I'd be real surprised if he played queens plus this way. You know, probably he's raising a normal amount with a premium hand. This is a super easy call, and this should play very, very well against the range. This guy is going to open jam for a billion big blinds. So I assume we call. Okay, we do call. That's good. And we somehow hold up against the 5-3 suited. So I guess saying his ranged shove was wide was an understatement. Perhaps he was on tilt a little bit because his ace-5 didn't hold up. Imagine that. Yeah, his stack, card player says his stack is a tell. Rarely will a decent player have this big a stack. At this point in the tournament, there's some truth to that. You know, a decent player can have a big stack, but they have to have some good situations come up and go well for them. Usually someone with a super big stack early tends to be someone playing very aggressive and gambling, and they've gotten lucky. If we had gotten the ace-king in against him, we'd have all his chips. Maybe, maybe not. We didn't see what he had. He could have, you know, could have had some kind of pocket pair. or whatnot. So maybe. Ace-4 suited in this position, I like folding it. It's close. We're right in middle position. I think that's fine to fold it in middle position. Would open it in the cutover button. Yeah, we didn't know. Yeah, with the ace-king hand, it's a good point. We didn't know his range, but and he's just he's the gift bank today, I guess. We didn't know his range, but he comes with a ton of chips, and sometimes that. I'm going to pause it here because we get a free play in the big blind and catch a nice flop. Sometimes with that really big stack, you'll see players make some small 3-bets right out of the bat when they come to the table. They're oftentimes doing it light, just trying to see who they can push around and push out of pots and stuff. And so when we have a premium in a possible spot like that, and we're only 30 big blinds deep, I think it's fine to go ahead and 4-bet him and plan to get it in with the ace-king. And then if we wind up getting it in with him and winning the hand, we have a really big stack. And if he folds, that's fine too. At least we've sent a little bit of a message that we're not a great target to be pushing around. So here we get a free play in the big blind with 10-9 suited. I think that's fine to take our free play in an unraised pot. This is obviously a great flop for us as far as flops go where we don't hit a pair. We have a flush draw and an open-ended straight draw. We are, and a gut shot straight flush draw. We are a favorite over any one pair hand. So we're actually an equity favorite over one pair hands at this point. And no matter how strong someone might be, we have pretty good equity. Even our worst case scenario is being up against, in terms of being up against made hands, the worst case would be up against a set. Even up against a set, we have pretty good hand equity with so many outs to improve to a straight or a flush. So this is certainly a hand that we can play strong. Both these stacks not very deep. So I would, we'll see what Deadeyes does here. I would absolutely raise on this flop. He calls. I would have raised right there as a semi-bluff. We have such a strong semi-bluffing hand. We don't mind getting it in if they want to get in. I would have raised immediately. He calls. This dude shoves. Other guy folds. This is obviously a snap call. If the other guy had reshoved, if KB2 reshoves, I'm going to get it in with this big a draw on the flop. All right, I'm willing to gamble for all those chips with such a huge draw because we have so many outs to improve to a really strong hand here. With the combo draw, I think we should be getting it in. We're getting a big overlay from the pot, and perhaps even an equity favored. We should be getting it in. But anyway, this is a snap call, so let's see what happens. All right, so it's a pretty standard shove for the short stack with top pair and a king kicker, and we hit one of our many outs. And that's another example of a type of hand we were actually, small equity favored over. To throw that in a poker stove, you find we're a small equity favorite. Yeah, it's a case where the quote-unquote best hand, the top pair king kicker, is actually going to win that pot less often than we will in the long run because we have so many outs. Ace-4 early position, good fold. So see, KB is limping under the gun with 10-9 suited. So you can see the kind of hand strengths that people like to limp in with. Suited connectors, 2 broadways, Ace rag suited, small pairs. Pretty good range estimate for people limping in like that. The kind of hands that look to them to be too pretty to throw away. They want to see a flop, but not strong enough to raise. That kind of hand strength. So here we go. I'll just cue this back up. We just talked about this in the last member review I was doing. The small blind heads up in the blinds. The small blind completes. Okay, boom. So if the small blind had any kind of real hand, they would usually raise. This complete, again, is a pretty weak hand. Actually, King 9 should be pretty well ahead of their complete range. The range, when I say complete range, I mean the range with which they would complete the small blind rather than raise. King 9 should be pretty much ahead of that, but this is a spot where we can raise them and expect them to fold probably the vast majority of the time. So actually it wouldn't matter if we had King 9 or we had Deuce 3 or whatever. We can raise this weak limp and expect to get a ton of folds. This is a spot where we can attack weak play against a stack size that's probably not willing to commit their stack, or they would have raised. You know, they're not so deep that they can comfortably call a raise, and yet they're not so short that they need to make a stand, and they're trying to see a cheap flop. And we shouldn't allow them to realize that goal of seeing a cheap flop. So we can pop it, and they're just, 800 is good. They're just going to fold. They're just going to fold a ton of the time. 800's good. 600. 600's probably not enough. Where's a little more? Maybe 700. 700 to 800 is good. As they get shorter, then we want to make sure that we're not leaving them any opportunity to make a loose move on us. Okay, so right now the guy's got like 14 bigs. It's pretty close. I think if he's like 12 bigs, if he's down to 3,000 chips, then I'm just putting him all in with King 9, because it gets to the point where we simply can't raise and then fold to a shove if he limp shoves. Okay, it would actually be reasonable to just put him in with King 9 here. And again, it's not real risky because, well, first of all, we have obviously a ton more chips than him, but he's just never calling. The guy's just never calling. So at any rate, we check our option. I would definitely bet the flop. The guy's checking to us. I would bet the flop. He checks again. I would bet the turn. He checks again. Now I would check the river. Okay, now I would actually check the river. And just show it down. I mean, the guy almost certainly has no pair, and we have a king high. We win with king high. We don't need to make a bet. He's just going to fold the worst hand if we bet. So, yeah. So here, see, here's the type of hand he's trying to see a cheap flop with. 9 deuce suited. He wants to see a flop and see if he hits anything. We jam him pre-flop, and we just take down that money. And we don't have to make a hand. We don't have to play a flop. We just take the money. It's like free chips. Okay, now we have King 9 suited. Again, like I said, it should be well ahead of his limp range there, but it's also free chips. So, if we had 7 deuce, we'd actually be dominated. But it wouldn't matter because he's never going to call. He's just going to whatever weak hand he's trying to see a cheap flop with. He doesn't want to raise because he only has 14 bigs, but he wants to see if he can catch a cheap flop. Whatever hand he's trying to do it with, I mean, that's what his goal is. Don't allow him to realize that goal. Go ahead and attack him. That's a common spot that we can use to accumulate chips without hands. I definitely like folding there. King Deuce. I don't really like this play. I don't like limping in on the button here with King Deuce. The big blind is really short now. The big blind has 4, 8, 9 bigs to start the hand. So, I mean, what are we going to fold to shove, I guess? We have a really loose small blind. King Deuce is a little weak. I think I would probably just pass King Deuce. Okay, if the small blind were tight, I could see raising a king and then planning to get it in with Medusa if Medusa goes with her hand. But King Deuce is pretty weak for that. It's pretty borderline for that even. And then we have a loose player in the small blind who might be inclined to call, and it'd be hard to shake off as well. So I think I would just pass this. I don't really like limping here so much. So now the flop comes, we hit bottom pair, Kara bets into us and we're calling. I presume when we make the call with bottom pair, again, I think this is a bit suspect. I presume that the intent here is that we're floating in position, so we're going to see what the turn card is and what Kara does before we have to make our next decision. So the turn card, not particularly good for our range, could improve Kara's flop betting range, and Kara is making the statement that Kara likes this play, or likes the board. Again, so now I think this is a fold, and we do fold. But overall, kind of just yuck on that whole hand. I think if you're ever going to be limping on the button in spots like that, have very clear defined reasons about why you're limping and how that's going to turn out to be profitable for you over the long haul. And in most cases, I think it's going to wind up being better to either open for a raise or fold, depending on the stack sizes, who's in the blinds, and so forth. So we're open raising with ace-10 suited. I definitely like that. We're min raising, so I'm not sure what that means, because the last time we min raised we had aces but we got no action. Every other time we've raised we've 3x'd. So perhaps they'll think we have aces. They'll just fold. If we take down blinds and antes, that's a great result. We have ace-10. Ace-10 is not a monster. Three deuce, good fold obviously. So here's the min 3-bet again. Okay, so here's the min 3-bet again from the button, right? We have an under the gun raise, the button min 3-bets, like they did to us with the ace-king. You get a better understanding now of why it's going to be not a bad idea to go with the ace-king? So this guy is not min 3-betting to trap with a big hand. He's just trying to push people around. And it failed because he's run into a real hand. You know, that strategy of the min 3-bet, small 3-betting and trying to push people around, that can be very, very effective when your opponents are opening light. But you know, you're going to run into hands, and it's not going to be effective. And part of that strategy, by the way, I should point this out, that min 3-bet strategy of pushing people around can be very effective if your opponents are raising light. But part and parcel with that, which you know doesn't apply to this table so much, part and parcel with that strategy is when they push back, you have to be able to get away from your hand. So he min 3-bet. The guy's raising under the gun, which is generally a strength spot, and then he min 3-bets, and the guy 4-bets him, a solid 4-bet. So, I mean, it's time to release king 4 suited. It's not time to put more chips in and eventually stack off and double the guy up. it's time to release king 4 suited. So you made a play because you have, whatever. This guy's not thinking along these lines, but let's say that you are making a small 3-bet in an attempt to re-steal over someone you perceive as opening light, and you know they're capable of folding. Those are the, that's the criteria under which you should be making the play in many cases. And they don't fold. They come back over the top. King 4 is no good. Throw it away. And here again, we have the 8-7. The same kind of thing. The guy limps pre. We should be raising. Same thing. Blind versus blind. So we went through this same discussion with the last review that I did. It was a similar spot where the big blind was never raising, and the small blind, it kept getting folded to, and the small blind kept limping. The guy limps. He's not going to call a raise. Now, he has more chips now. It's a little bit different. So he's not on 14 bigs anymore, but he's actually got a bigger stack. So this is a little bit different scenario, but I would still be inclined to raise him. We wouldn't be jamming. It's too deep to jam. But we could certainly raise in position and see if he really wants to see a flop and play a pot out of position with us. And then he bombs into us for larger than a pot size bet on the flop. Yeah, I don't think he has an ace, but I think it's fine to fold. He could certainly have an ace. It's not impossible for him to have an ace. Just the fact that he's making an overbet, slightly more than the pot size bet on the flop, generally looks like a pretty good show of strength. I think folding middle pair there is fine. If we, raising, I think, invest too much against a bet that really does show some strength, and then calling in position to float just puts us in another spot where we have to really fold to a turn bet unless we improve, catch an 8 or a 7 to make a better hand. So I think it's fine just to let it go there when he makes such a big bet. If he bets smaller, we can certainly float him, but overbetting the pot, I'm just going to throw that away. Yeah, he could have 8 deuce suited, right? Bottom 2 pair. He absolutely could have 8 deuce suited. We know that because that's in his range, and we know it because we saw him the last time limp with 9 deuce suited. Why wouldn't he be doing it with 8 deuce suited if he did it with 9 deuce suited, right? So yeah, we can't even discount bottom 2 pair on the ace 8 deuce flop. Seven deuce, good fold. King 7, I think that's a little too weak to raise a limper, so I think that's a fine fold. So clearly he's capable of limping with some kind of hands. Pocket pair of 9s, he limps there. 7-6 suited, I think that's fine to fold it. Queen 8 suited, I think that's fine to fold. Eight 6 offsuit under the gun, fine to fold under the gun. I'd probably be opening that in later position if I was first in. 10-6 suited in the big, I think that's a good fold. Pius Heinz would have played Queen 8. Yeah, he probably would have played Queen. Pius Heinz would have been all in with the Ace King also. Oh, timeout. Heinz would have been all in softer than Ace King, I think. I watched after the Sunday special session yesterday. I missed the first couple hours, but then after that I watched the final table main event yesterday, and Heinz just was very, very impressive. He played so good, I thought. Such a great... You guys, seriously, you want to... I'm on a tangent here, but I'll take a brief 30 seconds because it's worth it. If you didn't see that, or you have the ability to get that, the tape of yesterday's final table, they played to the final 3, then they'll finish tomorrow night. Watch that tape. I mean, watch it all the way through. Heinz, I thought, put on an excellent demonstration of strong leg play that was controlled and not wild. And they now just having talked about it, like, kept, you know, they said a couple times like they were waiting to see him kind of blow up, and we saw that, I think, 4 months ago in July, that he did play the lag style, but had some blow-ups and in some spots where he made some bad decisions and got lucky. But he really, in the last 4 months, has improved his lag play by leaps and bounds. I thought he played so spectacular, the lag style. Great at applying pressure, great at getting away when he needed to, great at reading people and making the adjustments. I thought he just played... no surprise to me that he's the chip leader. And if he plays like that tomorrow night, the final 3, he's going to win. That's what I think. I mean, obviously, I think he's the favorite now with the chip lead 3-handed. And Ben Lamb is a great player, obviously, and has chips as well. But man, Heinz played super lag, played the lag style super good, I think. Okay, so onwards and forwards. Let's go back to the 90-man here with Dead Ice. Ace-8, the small blind. We have the loose guy min raising. This might actually, let's see, okay, it folds to us. We've seen this guy already out of line with so many hands. Yeah, I know he's min raising now and not shoving. So, okay, maybe we think that he's doing that because he's got a stronger hand. I don't know, it's possible. But, I mean, he also min 3-bet with King 4 suited and then stacked it off. So, this might be a spot where I would re-raise to isolate with Ace-8. It's a little thin, but against the dude who's opening, maybe not so much. Okay, so I might have actually gone ahead and attacked. We folded. Folding's not, you know, it's not bad. It's fine that we folded the Ace-8, but that could be a spot that is not bad to attack, given how loose that guy seems to be willing to get chips in the middle. Like the mighty King 5. King 5's a really big hand, but okay. So looks like we're at the final table now. 10-9, we're going to fold. I think that's good. We'll watch how this one plays out, then we'll call it for tonight. They all check down. So we'll pick it up here with the 10-9, and we'll talk about this hand. It's the first hand of the final table. When we pick this up for part 2 next Monday night. Yeah, this looks like the final table. Any questions on what we've seen? Actually, maybe this isn't the final table. Let's see, we just had, I'm looking back at the last hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players. So this isn't going to be the final table. This will be 2 tables, so we're down to 2 tables left. Yeah, and there's obviously way less than 135,000 chips on this table. 10, 23, 37, 40, 52, 65. We got about 68K. We got about half the chips on this table. So this is 2 tables left. So we'll pick it up here tomorrow with 2 tables left with Dead Eyes. Any questions or comments on what we saw today? I think we kind of summed it up about midway through today, and I think that assessment didn't change. Dead Eyes seems to have some of the right ideas about attacking certain spots, but also perhaps not recognizing the right spots or identifying the opportunities. And again, with the big blind, small blind dynamic, when you're in the big blind and the small blind, you know, when they have 14 big blinds or whatever as a stack size and they limp, they're pretty much never calling you shove. You could just shove. They're not calling you. They're limping usually to try and see a cheap flop. Their goal is to see a cheap flop. Don't allow them to realize that goal. It's like free chips. Doesn't really matter what you have. But you can certainly attack them with raises. And then when they're deeper, and it came up again later, and he had more than that, you know, like 30 bigs. That's a different scenario when they're a little bit deeper. But I would still be inclined to make a standard type raise in position. And, you know, until they demonstrate that they're actually going to contest those spots, I'm going to keep attacking them when I have the positional advantage and they show weakness. It's basically what it boils down to. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Okay, good stuff. We will be back again for part 2 1 week from tonight. Be a little bit earlier on the clock, as we won't have 2 late sessions. The late session was an adjustment time for Andy earlier. Normally would be the evening Euro / time slot, but he was traveling, as you guys know, and traveling to London and actually doing tonight's. Wanted to do his training today, but move it a little bit later on the clock, so doing it from his hotel room in London. Okay, so I'll be back with you next Monday for part 2. Thanks for attending, and good luck on the felts.